Ever wonder what $40 billion disappearing overnight feels like? You exist in a digital gold rush where keyboard warriors promise instant wealth with fancy algorithms and cartoon apes. Yet these revolutionary disruptors share something with 17th century tulip mania: spectacular, wealth vaporizing implosions. One founder fled with $2 billion, while another accidentally distributed $90 million in tokens. In this video, we'll trace the spectacular collapse of crypto's most catastrophic failures, revealing how greed and hubris turn digital dreams into financial nightmares. Fortune favors the brave until it bankrupts them. 1. The Mona Lisa of financial catastrophes, the FTX collapse. In 2022, cryptocurrency exchange FTX went from industry darling to smoldering crater in less than a week. Its wonderkind founder, Sam Bankman-Fried, the curly-haired messiah of effective altruism, had been secretly treating customer funds like his personal piggy bank, funneling billions to his hedge fund, Alameda Research. When the house of cards collapsed, $8 billion in customer funds vanished. The courts were unimpressed with SBF's boy genius routine and sentenced him to 25 years in prison. In one spectacular implosion, FTX managed to do what critics had failed to accomplish for years: convince mainstream America that maybe, just maybe, the crypto industry wasn't entirely populated by responsible adults. 2. Imagine building a financial system where the dollar is backed by another dollar you made up. That was Terra Luna's brilliant plan with their UST stablecoin. In May 2022, this algorithmic stablecoin, a term even its creators couldn't explain without sounding like cult members, lost its dollar peg and collapsed alongside its sister token Luna. The mechanism was elegant in theory. If UST dropped below $1, traders could burn it for $1 worth of Luna. But when panic selling began, Luna's value plummeted too, creating a death spiral that wiped out $40 billion in days. Founder Do Kwon, once crypto's golden boy, fled to Singapore, Serbia, and eventually was arrested in Montenegro. The collapse triggered a domino effect across the industry, proving that in crypto, your clever math is only as good as investor confidence. 3. In 2022, the cryptocurrency lender Celsius Network froze withdrawals after promising customers they could unbank themselves with eye-popping 18% interest rates on deposits. Founder Alex Mashinsky, with his trademark "Banks are not your friends" slogan, had been gambling customer funds on high-risk investments while assuring everyone that Celsius was safer than traditional banks. When crypto markets tanked, Celsius filed for bankruptcy, revealing a $1.2 billion hole in its balance sheet. Court filings showed Mashinsky had withdrawn $10 million for himself just before the freeze. The bankruptcy forced judges to determine whether depositors owned their crypto or were just unsecured creditors in line behind Wall Street, vultures. The case transformed from financial tragedy to legal precedent, establishing that in crypto lending, your funds are rarely as safe as advertised. 4. You know that friend who keeps borrowing money for increasingly desperate gambling binges? Meet Three Arrows Capital, the Singapore-based hedge fund that borrowed billions from every major crypto lender, then bet it all on Luna just before it collapsed. Founded by Sue Ju and Kyle Davies, 3AC projected sophistication with philosophical Twitter threads while secretly taking enormous leveraged positions. When Luna imploded in May 2022, 3AC ghosted creditor calls and fled Singapore, leaving behind $3.5 billion in debt. Court-appointed liquidators eventually found little more than a few neglected trading accounts and some bizarre NFTs purchased at peak prices. The collapse triggered a contagion that toppled Voyager, Celsius, and BlockFi like dominoes. The saga transformed crypto lending from a growth industry to a case study in systemic risk, forcing regulators worldwide to reconsider oversight of the entire sector. 5. In the gallery of crypto scams, OneCoin stands as the Sistine Chapel of fraud. Founded in 2014 by the self-proclaimed crypto queen Ruja Ignatova, OneCoin defrauded investors of over $4 billion through a fake cryptocurrency that existed only in PowerPoint presentations. While Bitcoin had a blockchain, OneCoin had a SQL database on a server in Bulgaria. At lavish events, Ignatova, draped in red designer gowns, promised a financial revolution while selling educational packages that supposedly contained tokens of this non-existent crypto. In 2017, as authorities closed in, she boarded a flight to Athens and vanished. Her brother took over, then flipped for the FBI. OneCoin wasn't just a fraud, it was performance art, complete with its missing mastermind, now sitting on the FBI's 10 most wanted list, right alongside terrorists and cartel leaders. The cryptocurrency that never existed continues to make legal history. 6. Before there was FTX, there was BitConnect, cryptocurrency's first mega Ponzi scheme that collapsed under the weight of its own absurdity. From 2016 to 2018, BitConnect promised investors returns of up to 3,700% annually through a proprietary trading bot. This miracle algorithm allegedly generated profits regardless of market conditions, the holy grail of finance that has eluded Nobel Prize-winning economists. The scheme's public face, Carlos Matos, became an internet meme with his ecstatic presentation screaming, "BitConnect!" When regulators began asking questions, BitConnect imploded overnight. Founder Satish Kumbhani disappeared with an estimated $2.5 billion. The SEC eventually won judgments against promoters, but most investors recovered pennies on the dollar. BitConnect's legacy lives on in memes, YouTube compilations, and as a textbook case study for crypto fraud investigators, learning what enthusiasm without substance looks like at scale. 7. Mt. Gox wasn't supposed to be a cryptocurrency exchange at all. The domain was originally Magic, the Gathering Online Exchange, a website for trading fantasy gaming cards that was repurposed into the world's largest Bitcoin marketplace. By 2014, this hastily converted platform handled 70% of all Bitcoin transactions worldwide. What could possibly go wrong? Everything, as it turns out. Under the leadership of Mark Karpeles, Mt. Gox lost 850,000 Bitcoins, worth $460 million, through years of security breaches, while apparently nobody was watching the digital vault. The Tokyo-based exchange filed for bankruptcy in February 2014, leaving thousands of customers empty-handed. The incident destroyed trust in crypto exchanges globally, establishing the industry mantra, "Not your keys, not your coins." 10 years and countless lawsuits later, former customers are still fighting to recover fragments of their lost fortunes. 8. In July 2022, crypto lender Voyager Digital sent customers an email essentially saying, "Remember those billions you entrusted us with?" Well, funny story. Voyager had loaned $665 million, nearly 60% of its loan assets, to a single borrower, Three Arrows Capital, which had just collapsed like a lawn chair in a hurricane. Voyager's marketing had promised customers government-level protection through FDIC insurance, conveniently omitting that this only covered USD deposits, not crypto. When Voyager filed for bankruptcy, 3.5 million customers discovered their safe investments were now unsecured claims in a bankruptcy proceeding. The company that once ran Super Bowl ads featuring Tom Brady and Larry David was ultimately purchased by FTX, which then spectacularly imploded 3 months later. The Voyager saga showcased how quickly crypto companies could transform from billion-dollar unicorns to cautionary tales through catastrophic risk management failures. 9. BlockFi was the respectable face of crypto lending, until it wasn't. Founded in 2017 by Zach Prince and Flory Marquez, BlockFi offered interest-bearing accounts and crypto-backed loans with a veneer of Wall Street professionalism. They raised funds from prestigious venture capitalists and avoided the Carnival Barker marketing of competitors. But beneath the polished exterior, BlockFi was taking massive risks, including significant exposure to Three Arrows Capital and FTX. When these dominoes fell in 2022, BlockFi needed a bailout. FTX's Sam Bankman-Fried, playing the role of crypto's JP Morgan, offered a $400 million credit facility before his own empire crumbled. BlockFi filed for bankruptcy in November 2022, just weeks after FTX. The collapse illustrated how interconnected the crypto ecosystem had become, with even the responsible players caught in the industry-wide contagion. The case forced bankruptcy courts to create new precedents for handling digital assets in insolvency proceedings. 10. In October 2021, as Netflix's Squid Game topped global charts, anonymous developers launched a cryptocurrency named after the show. Within days, the Squid token surged from 1 cent to 2,161, fueled by breathless media coverage and FOMO-driven investors who apparently skipped the white paper's grammatical red flags. There was just one small problem. Buyers couldn't sell their tokens due to anti-dumping technology, a feature disguised as a bug. When the price peaked, developers executed a classic rug pull, converting $3.4 million of investor funds to untraceable currency and disappearing. The token's value dropped to zero in minutes. No Netflix affiliation existed, no permissions were secured, and 43,000 investors were left with worthless tokens. The Squid debacle highlighted how meme culture, celebrity IP, and crypto speculation had merged into a perfect storm of financial recklessness. It remains the textbook example of why researching tokens before investing isn't just good advice, it's survival. 11. In April 2021, Turkish cryptocurrency exchange Thodex shut down with a notice claiming they needed 4 or 5 days to address an investment partnership. In reality, 27-year-old CEO Faruk Fatih Özer had fled to Albania with an estimated $2 billion in customer funds. In a country where crypto offered shelter from Turkey's skyrocketing inflation, thousands of citizens lost their life savings. Police detained 62 suspects and issued an Interpol red notice for Özer, who was eventually caught in Albania in 2022 after more than a year on the run. While governments debated whether crypto needed regulation, Thodex made the decision easy for Turkey, which immediately moved to restrict cryptocurrency payments nationwide. The case stands as a stark reminder that in unregulated markets, exchange operators can simply take the money and run, leaving even the most sophisticated blockchain technology powerless against human dishonesty. When your money vanishes, knowing exactly who stole it offers little consolation. 12. Have you tried turning it off and on again? Usually works for computer problems, not for when developers abscond with $6.7 million. Luna Yield, a DeFi yield aggregator on the Solana blockchain, vanished just 2 days after launch in August 2021. The project had completed an initial DEX offering on Solpad, a launchpad supposedly vetting projects for legitimacy. After raising millions, the anonymous team deleted all social media accounts, websites, and transferred investor funds through a series of wallets designed to obscure the money trail. The speed of the rug pull set records even by crypto standards. Investors barely had time to bookmark the project website before it disappeared. Solpad eventually offered partial compensation to affected users, but the damage to confidence in Solana DeFi projects was done. The incident highlighted the fundamental contradiction of a financial system that eliminates trusted intermediaries while requiring users to trust anonymous developers with their money. 13. There's a reason ancient Egyptians portrayed Anubis, god of death, with a canine head. In the crypto world, dog-themed tokens have been portfolio killers. Anubis Dio raised an astounding $60 million in October 2021, despite having no website, no product, and no identified team, just a picture of a dog wearing an Egyptian headdress. 20 hours later, all funds vanished from the project's liquidity pool. A supposed team member named Beerus claimed to have fallen for a phishing attack. an explanation met with widespread skepticism. The incident occurred at the height of dog token mania, when investors threw millions at anything canine related following Dogecoin and Shiba Inu's success. Anubis Deo demonstrated how speculation had completely detached from fundamentals, with millions flowing to projects solely based on animal logos. The aftermath saw launchpad platforms implementing stricter vetting, but not before proving that in crypto, even gods can become unwitting bag holders. 14. In September 2020, hackers breached KuCoin exchange and casually strolled away with $281 million in various cryptocurrencies. The Singapore-based exchange had promoted its bank-level security system with multiple security layers that turned out to be about as effective as a screen door on a submarine. The attack was later attributed to North Korean hackers, adding international espionage flair to what was already a spectacular security failure. Unlike many crypto heists, this story has a somewhat happy ending. KuCoin managed to recover 84% of the stolen assets through blockchain tracking, negotiation with hackers, and assistance from other exchanges and projects. The remaining losses were covered by KuCoin's insurance fund. The incident highlighted both the vulnerability of centralized exchanges and the surprising traceability of blockchain transactions. It also demonstrated that North Korea had become quite adept at cryptocurrency theft, using stolen funds to evade international sanctions while financing its nuclear program, a use case not mentioned in any crypto white paper. 15. When brothers Race and Amir Kaji, aged 21 and 17, founded South African cryptocurrency platform AfriCrypt, they presented themselves as investment prodigies with proprietary trading algorithms. In April 2021, the brothers sent clients an odd email claiming the platform was hacked and requesting that no legal action be taken as it would delay the recovery process. Suspicious investors hired lawyers, only to discover the brothers had fled to Tanzania with 69,000 Bitcoin worth approximately $3.6 billion. One of the largest crypto heists in history. The brothers briefly surfaced to deny wrongdoing before disappearing again. South African authorities found themselves hamstrung by the unregulated nature of cryptocurrency. The incident prompted South Africa's financial regulator to propose new crypto regulations and sent shockwaves through Africa's growing crypto community. AfriCrypt demonstrated how easily young operators with technical skills, but no oversight, could abscond with billions, leaving investors with nothing but worthless court judgments and a valuable lesson about due diligence. 16. The NFT gold rush of 2021-2022 produced some spectacular frauds, but Mutant Ape Planet deserves special recognition. Creator Aurélien Michel, a 24-year-old French citizen living in Dubai, sold 9,299 NFTs of mutant apes to investors for about $2.9 million, promising exclusive rewards, raffles, and community giveaways. Instead, he transferred the funds to personal wallets and abandoned the project. When confronted in a Discord chat, Michel admitted the fraud, writing, "We never intended to rug, but the community went way too toxic." Apparently, investors became toxic when they expected the promised benefits they'd paid for. How unreasonable. Unlike many crypto scammers, Mitchell faced consequences. While visiting New York in January 2023, he was arrested by Homeland Security. The case broke new legal ground as one of the first criminal prosecutions for NFT fraud, establishing that promises made during NFT mints are subject to wire fraud statutes, regardless of how cartoonish the underlying artwork might be. 17. In January 2023, Genesis Global Capital filed for bankruptcy, revealing the $3.4 billion crater at the center of crypto's credit markets. As the lending arm of Digital Currency Group, Genesis was the quiet giant financing much of the crypto industry's growth. When Three Arrows Capital defaulted on a $2.36 billion loan in 2022, Genesis absorbed the hit, but was fatally wounded. The final blow came from FTX's collapse, trapping another $175 million. The bankruptcy created a cascade of problems for connected businesses, particularly Gemini Exchange's Earn program, where 340,000 customers had $900 million frozen. This led to an unusually public spat between Gemini co-founder Cameron Winklevoss and DCG's Barry Silbert, with Winklevoss writing an open letter accusing Silbert of bad faith stall tactics. The Genesis implosion demonstrated how deeply intertwined the supposedly decentralized crypto industry had become, with most major players connected through a complex web of loans, investments, and dependencies that unwound with shocking speed when credit conditions tightened. 18. In crypto trading, where degen strategies are celebrated, Hong Kong-based Babel Finance still managed to distinguish itself. While presenting a conservative face to institutional clients, Babel's team was secretly trading customer funds through proprietary accounts with no risk controls. During the Terra Luna collapse in 2022, these speculative positions resulted in catastrophic losses exceeding $280 million, including 8,000 Bitcoin that simply vanished. When the market plunged, Babel suspended withdrawals, trapping customer funds. Co-founder Wang Li was later ousted for his role in the losses. The company attempted restructuring, proposing to repay creditors with a new token issued over multiple years, essentially asking customers who'd already lost their Bitcoin to accept an IOU for yet another crypto token. The Babel disaster illustrated the fundamental conflicts of interest when crypto platforms act as both custodians and traders of customer assets, a practice that would be prohibited in traditional finance, but flourished in crypto's regulatory vacuum. 19. Singapore-based crypto lender Hodlnaut froze withdrawals in August 2022, but unlike competitors who were forthcoming about their problems, Hodlnaut's founders tried the novel strategy of just lying about everything. The company claimed it had no exposure to the collapsed Terra ecosystem, but court documents revealed it had lost $189.7 million, about 70% of assets under management, on that bet alone. When withdrawals were suspended, founders Zhu Juntao and Simon Lee deleted thousands of documents related to investments and withdrew $18.5 million for themselves. The company sought liquidation after owing $160 million to creditors, with most remaining assets stuck on, you guessed it, the bankrupt FTX exchange. Singapore police launched a criminal investigation for potential fraud and cheating. Hodlnaut's spectacular mismanagement and subsequent cover-up attempts demonstrated how even in the trust-minimized world of crypto, investors ultimately relied on the character of founders who often proved unworthy of that trust. 20. The Frosties NFT saga could be titled How to Turn Art Theft into Real Prison Time. In January 2022, creators Ethan Nguyen and Andre Lacuna launched the Frosties NFT collection, featuring 8,888 cartoon ice cream characters that sold out within hours, raising $1.3 million. Buyers expected staking features, metaverse integration, and exclusive giveaways. Instead, the creators shut down the project's Discord, transferred the funds to various wallets, and abandoned ship. But unlike most crypto scammers, these two made a critical error. They tried to immediately launch a second NFT scam called Embers, while authorities were investigating their first one. In March 2022, they were arrested and charged with wire fraud and money laundering conspiracy, facing up to 40 years in prison. The case marked one of the first major criminal prosecutions for NFT fraud, establishing that promises made in Discord servers and roadmaps could constitute wire fraud when made with intent to deceive. 21. In February 2022, hackers exploited a vulnerability in Wormhole, a DeFi bridge connecting Solana and Ethereum, and extracted 120,000 ETH worth $325 million. The breach targeted a recently updated piece of code that validators had failed to verify across all environments, creating a gap in the bridge's security. Bridge protocols like Wormhole create synthetic versions of coins from one blockchain to use on another, essentially requiring users to trust that the wrapped tokens remain backed 1.1 by real assets. When the hack occurred, Wormhole offered the attacker a $10 million bug bounty to return the funds. After that polite request was ignored, Jump Crypto, Wormhole's parent company, stepped in and replenished the entire $325 million to maintain the bridge's solvency and integrity. The incident highlighted the unique vulnerabilities of cross-chain bridges, which have become attractive targets for hackers due to their complexity and the massive funds they hold in hot wallets. 22. Italian cryptocurrency exchange. BitGrail managed to lose $120 million, $146.5 million, worth of nano tokens between 2017 and 2018, then tried to convince users and authorities that the fault lay with the nano blockchain itself. Founder Francesco Ferrano, known online as the Bomber, claimed hackers exploited a flaw in Nano's protocol, an assertion Nano developers vehemently disputed. As investigators dug deeper, they discovered BitGrail had been insolvent for months, with Ferrano continuing to accept deposits despite knowing about the losses. The plot thickened when evidence suggested some of the stolen funds had been moved through accounts connected to Ferrano himself. Italian authorities eventually shut down the exchange and charged Ferrano with computer fraud, fraudulent bankruptcy, and money laundering. The BitGrail fiasco illustrated the hazards of small exchanges built on shaky technical foundations and run by operators with limited security experience, a combination that repeatedly proved disastrous in crypto's early days. 23. In March 2022, hackers affiliated with North Korea's Lazarus Group pulled off one of history's largest cryptocurrency heists, stealing $625 million from the Ronin network, the blockchain supporting popular play-to-earn game Axie Infinity. The attackers gained access to private keys controlling 5 of 9 validator nodes, enough to approve fraudulent transactions. What made this attack particularly alarming was that it occurred in January, but wasn't discovered until March, meaning the hackers had maintained unauthorized access for months. Sky Mavis, Axie Infinity's developer, had temporarily reduced security thresholds during a period of high user load, creating the vulnerability exploited by the attackers. The hack highlighted fundamental security weaknesses in many sidechains designed to make blockchain games more user-friendly. While players lost millions in real money, North Korea gained funding for its weapons program, a geopolitical dimension to crypto theft that regulators worldwide could no longer ignore. The U.S. Treasury Department later sanctioned the wallet addresses involved. 24. In August 2021, Poly Network suffered a $611 million hack that immediately became the largest DeFi heist in history. But what followed was even more extraordinary. A bizarre public negotiation played out through blockchain messages. The hacker, dubbing himself Mr. White Hat, claimed to have attacked the cross-chain protocol for fun and to expose its security flaws. After extracting hundreds of millions across Ethereum, Binance Smart Chain, and Polygon, the attacker began returning funds in installments while engaging in philosophical discussions about ethics and security. Poly Network tried every possible approach, from threats to offering a $500,000 bounty to creating a position as chief security advisor for the anonymous hacker. Remarkably, the strategy worked. Most funds were eventually returned. The incident revealed both the catastrophic vulnerabilities in cross-chain bridges and the strange ethics of blockchain crime, where some attackers operate in a gray area between criminal and security researcher, stealing millions to prove they could. 25. In December 2021, Cayman Islands-based exchange Bitmart suffered a $196 million hack that CEO Sheldon Sia initially described as a large-scale security breach involving 2 hot wallets. In reality, hackers had stolen a single private key through a compromised device, giving them complete access to transfer vast holdings of various tokens. Bitmart promised to compensate all users from company funds, but many customers waited months for reimbursement, with some reporting they never received compensation for less popular tokens. The attack highlighted the persistent vulnerability of centralized exchanges, where billions in assets are often secured by a handful of private keys. Security analysts noted that while Bitmart and other exchanges advertised bank-grade security, their actual practices often fell far short, lacking basic protections like multi-signature requirements and proper key management. The hacks served as a painful reminder that even as the crypto industry matured in some areas, basic security practices remained dangerously inadequate at many of the platforms where everyday users traded. 26. The Wonderland Time saga reads like a crypto soap opera. The Reserve Currency Protocol was backed by the Wonderland DAO Treasury, with community member Sifu, real name Michael Patron, serving as Treasury Manager. In January 2022, blockchain detective Zach XBT revealed that Sifu was actually Michael Patron, co-founder of the infamous Quadriga CX exchange, where $169 million vanished when the CEO supposedly died. A case we'll get to shortly. Wonderland's founder Daniele Sestigali knew Patron's identity, but kept it secret. When the news broke, Time token crashed 40% in hours as investors realized their funds were being managed by someone previously involved in money laundering, fraud, and identity theft. The protocol splintered, with holders voting on whether to continue or return treasury funds to investors. Beyond the immediate damage, the scandal raised profound questions about anonymity in DeFi, where billions are controlled by unidentified individuals. The incident forced a reckoning throughout the session industry about the trade-offs between privacy and accountability in financial protocols managing vast sums. 27. You don't often hear the words crypto and death spiral from billionaire Mark Cuban, but Iron Finance's Titan token collapse left even seasoned investors speechless. In June 2021, Titan, part of a partially collateralized stablecoin system called Iron, surged from $10 to $65 within days. Cuban publicly praised the project, mentioning his own investment. Then, the floor fell out. As large holders began taking profits, Titan's price dipped, triggering the algorithm securing Iron's dollar peg to mint more Titan tokens. This flooded the market, causing further price drops, which required minting even more tokens. A perfect death spiral. Within 24 hours, Titan crashed from $65 to effectively zero, vaporizing billions in value. Cuban likened the collapse to a bank run, but with no regulation or deposit insurance. The incident exposed the fragility of algorithmic stablecoins and the dangers of complex tokenomics models that work in theory but catastrophically fail under real-world stress. No investors received compensation, as the protocol had functioned exactly as designed, just not as hoped. 28. In December 2021, BadgerDAO users noticed something odd. Their wallets were approving transactions they hadn't initiated. The DeFi protocol had fallen victim to a sophisticated front-end attack, where hackers injected malicious code into the user interface, using a compromised Cloudflare API key. For weeks, the fake interface had been quietly harvesting approval permissions, allowing attackers to drain $121 million from user wallets. The exploit targeted high-value wallets, with one user losing 896 Bitcoin, $50 million. The attack was particularly insidious because many victims had followed best practices, using hardware wallets, but they still approved transactions through a compromised website. BadgerDAO eventually compensated users through a combination of protocol emissions and recovered funds. The incident highlighted how even security-conscious users remained vulnerable to attacks targeting the web interfaces, connecting them to blockchain protocols. While the immutable ledger itself couldn't be hacked, the numerous bridges between traditional web architecture and blockchain technology created attack vectors that even sophisticated users struggled to defend against. 29. MonoX Finance promised to revolutionize DeFi with single-token liquidity pools, eliminating the need for paired assets. In November 2021, hackers found a fatal flaw in this innovation. The protocol used the same token as both payment and receipt when updating price oracles. By manipulating this mechanism, attackers artificially inflated the price of the Mono token, then used it to extract $31 million in various cryptocurrencies from the platform. The exploit was both devastating and elegant, requiring just a few carefully constructed transactions to drain the protocol's liquidity. Despite a security audit by Halburn, the critical vulnerability had gone undetected. MonoX offered a 10% bounty to the attacker for returning the funds, an offer predictably ignored. The incident illustrated how novel DeFi mechanisms, while innovative, often introduced unforeseen attack vectors that even professional auditors missed. It also demonstrated the merciless efficiency of DeFi exploits. Unlike traditional financial fraud requiring elaborate schemes over months or years, blockchain hackers could extract millions in minutes through purely technical means. 30. SafeMoon launched in March 2021 with the slogan "Safely to the Moon," a 10% transaction tax, and relentless hype from influencers. By April, its market cap hit $6 billion as investors chased promised riches. While not a classic rug pull, what allegedly followed was something more insidious: a slow bleeding of investor funds through the project's liquidity pool. A class action lawsuit later claimed founders Kyle Nagy, Thomas Smith, and CEO John Caroni misappropriated millions and made false statements about locked liquidity. YouTuber CoffeeZilla published an investigation estimating $68 million in alleged fraud. The token's value eventually collapsed by over 99%, leaving retail investors with virtually worthless holdings. SafeMoon exemplified the dangers of projects building nothing but hype. Despite promises of exchanges, wallets, and even wind turbines in the Gambia, few substantial products materialized. The case demonstrated how cryptocurrency's retail investor culture often prioritized community belonging and memes over financial due diligence. 31. Cream Finance holds the dubious honor of being repeatedly hacked for increasingly large amounts, as if the protocol were determined to set new records with each security breach. Between 2021 and 2022, the lending protocol suffered at least 5 major exploits totaling over $200 million, with the largest single hack extracting $130 million through a complex flash loan attack. Each incident exploited different vulnerabilities: price, oracle manipulation, re-entrancy attacks, and flawed integrations with other protocols. After each hack, Cream would patch the specific vulnerability and continue operations, only to fall victim to a new exploit weeks or months later. The protocol's troubles highlighted a critical tension in DeFi development. The pressure to rapidly innovate and integrate with other protocols created an expanding attack surface that security practices couldn't keep pace with. Cream Finance eventually folded after repeated losses destroyed user confidence. The saga serves as a case study in how complex, interconnected DeFi systems can create cascading vulnerabilities that even diligent developers struggle to anticipate. 32. India's Gain Bitcoin scheme defrauded an estimated 100,000 investors of Bitcoin worth approximately $3 billion, making it one of history's largest crypto Ponzi operations. Founded in 2013 by Amit Bhardwaj, the scheme promised investors 10% monthly returns through Bitcoin mining, an absurdly unsustainable rate that should have raised immediate red flags. Investors were required to buy Bitcoin at twice the market rate through Bhardwaj's own exchange, effectively halving their investment from day one. The operation expanded through a pyramid structure with thousands of promoters nationwide. When the scheme collapsed in 2018, Indian authorities arrested Bhardwaj and several associates, seizing 63,000 Bitcoin. The investigation expanded after Bhardwaj's death in 2022, revealing high-profile accomplices and money laundering operations. The case forced Indian courts to establish precedents for handling digital assets in fraud cases and prompted regulatory scrutiny that shaped India's approach to cryptocurrency. Gain Bitcoin demonstrated how traditional Ponzi mechanics could be devastatingly effective when adapted to exploit excitement around new technology. 33. The strange saga of Canadian cryptocurrency exchange Quadriga CX begins like a thriller and ends like a tragedy. In December 2018, founder Gerald Cotton allegedly died in India from complications of Crohn's disease at age 30. The shocking twist: he was supposedly the only person with access to the exchange's cold wallets containing 143 million in customer funds. Grieving investors soon discovered a messier reality. Forensic blockchain analysis revealed the wallets were empty months before Cotton's death. Ernst & Young investigators uncovered that Cotton had created fake accounts to trade against customers and used their deposits for personal expenses, including luxury properties and a private aircraft. The improbable circumstances prompted conspiracy theories that Cotton faked his death to abscond with funds. Whether exit scam or fatal mismanagement, Quadriga CX illustrated the catastrophic risks of centralized exchanges with inadequate corporate governance. The case prompted Canadian regulators to develop new frameworks for cryptocurrency exchanges, requiring multi-signature wallets and proof of reserve audits to prevent similar disasters. 34. Chinese cryptocurrency exchange Fcoin imploded in February 2020 with a shockingly candid confession from founder Zhang Jian. In a lengthy post, he admitted the exchange couldn't pay the 13,000 Bitcoin, roughly $125 million. It owed users due to a lethal combination of technical errors and poor management decisions. Fcoin had pioneered the transaction mining model, where users earned exchange tokens by generating transaction fees, essentially getting paid to trade. This created artificial volume and temporarily made Fcoin the highest volume exchange worldwide. But the model contained the seeds of its own destruction. As token rewards flooded the market, existing holders continuously dumped their holdings, requiring ever-increasing trading volume to maintain the price. Meanwhile, the exchange was hemorrhaging funds through technical problems and data errors. Zhang claimed the failure was unintentional, but many users suspected a deliberate exit scam disguised as incompetence. Fcoin's collapse showed how incentive mechanisms in crypto could create perverse outcomes when short-sighted token economics met inexperienced management. 35. Everyone thinks they know about Wirecard, the German fintech darling that spectacularly imploded in 2020. What few remember is its bizarre crypto connection. Wirecard processed payments for numerous cryptocurrency exchanges, while CEO Markus Braun positioned the company as a blockchain innovator. Behind this cutting-edge facade, the company had fabricated $1.9 billion, $2.1 billion, in missing cash through elaborate accounting fraud. When auditors finally demanded to see the money, Wirecard claimed it was in Philippine banks, which promptly responded, "Nope, never heard of it." The house of cards collapsed overnight, sending executives fleeing across borders and investigators digging through years of financial fiction. German prosecutors charged Braun and other executives with fraud, market manipulation, and criminal breach of trust. The spectacular implosion forced European regulators to overhaul financial oversight and reminded investors that sometimes the most dangerous scams come wearing pinstripe suits. In the tragicomedy of financial regulation, Wirecard proved you don't need a blockchain to disappear billions. 36. You check your crypto exchange balance daily for years, blissfully unaware that your funds were actually stolen in 2018. Welcome to the Gate.io experience. In April 2018, the exchange suffered a $234 million hack by North Korean state-sponsored hackers, a fact they neglected to mention to customers until blockchain analysts uncovered it in 2022. For 4 years, Gate.io operated while concealing this catastrophic security breach, raising troubling questions about its solvency and integrity. When finally confronted with evidence, the exchange claimed they had quietly absorbed the losses and didn't want to cause panic. This bewildering 4-year gap between theft and disclosure highlighted the crypto industry's alarming lack of transparency and audit standards. The revelation triggered customer withdrawals and regulatory scrutiny across multiple jurisdictions. Gate.io's astonishing secret-keeping abilities demonstrated that in crypto exchanges, what you don't know can definitely hurt you, usually years after the damage is already done. 37. In July 2024, Indian cryptocurrency exchange WazirX watched $234.9 million vanish from its Ethereum multi-signature wallet through a series of transactions that nobody could explain. One moment the funds were there, the next, digital tumbleweed. The breach sparked immediate panic among India's estimated 20 million crypto users, many of whom had chosen WazirX as one of the country's largest exchanges. Exchange officials initially called it a security incident, before upgrading it to definitely a hack after blockchain sleuths tracked the stolen assets through multiple mixing services. The timing couldn't have been worse, coming just months after India had implemented clearer regulatory frameworks for digital assets. WazirX struggled to explain how attackers compromised multiple signature keys that were supposedly stored in separate, secure environments. The hack reignited debates about custody solutions and pushed India's central bank to accelerate its digital rupee plans as a safer alternative to private cryptocurrencies. Once again, crypto's favorite magic trick, making millions disappear, had worked flawlessly. 38. We've detected suspicious activity in your account, said the January 2022 email from Crypto.com to 483 very unhappy customers. The exchange, famous for renaming Los Angeles' iconic Staples Center and running ads featuring Matt Damon philosophizing that fortune favors the brave, had fallen victim to hackers who bypassed its much-touted security systems. While initially claiming minimal impact, blockchain analysis revealed that approximately $34 million had been stolen through an authentication bypass. CEO Chris Marsalek grudgingly admitted the breach, but refused to disclose the full scope, claiming the company had fully restored all accounts and made technical improvements. The exchange eventually reimbursed affected users, but the incident tarnished its premium security image. Perhaps the most amusing aspect was the timing. Just weeks after launching a global advertising campaign promoting crypto investing as the brave choice for pioneers and visionaries. In the Crypto.com saga, fortune may have favored the brave, but proper two-factor authentication would have worked better. 39. In April 2021, cryptocurrency exchange Hotbit sent its nearly 2 million users a message that basically said, "We've been hacked. We're shutting down. See you in about 2 weeks." The exchange, popular in Asia and Eastern Europe, had suffered a cyber attack that compromised its user database and wallet services. What should have been a quick fix turned into a 3-month suspension as investigators discovered deeper security issues. When trading finally resumed in July, users found their accounts intact, but cryptocurrency markets drastically changed, many having missed the peak of the 2021 bull run. While Hotbit managed to prevent direct theft of funds, the extended outage destroyed user trust and trading volume. The incident highlighted the operational risks of exchanges built on hastily developed infrastructure and inadequate security practices. Hotbit eventually shuttered operations entirely in 2023, joining the long list of crypto exchanges that disappeared not with dramatic heists, but with slow, painful decline and a final whimper. In crypto's ongoing comedy of errors, sometimes it's not the hack that kills you, it's the recovery. 40. In March 2019, Singapore-based exchange Coinbean announced it was undergoing maintenance and temporarily suspending operations. Strangely, this maintenance coincided perfectly with blockchain analysts tracking $105 million in tokens being drained from the exchange's hot wallets. What an extraordinary coincidence. When researchers pointed this out, Coinbean doubled down on the maintenance story, insisting no hack had occurred while refusing security audits. The maintenance dragged on for weeks as withdrawn tokens were laundered through various exchanges. Eventually, Coinbin quietly reopened with adjusted balances and modified trading pairs, never acknowledging the security breach. The absurd denial strategy worked surprisingly well. Many users accepted the exchange's explanation and continued trading. The incident became a case study in cryptocurrency exchange transparency failures, with regulators citing it when proposing mandatory breach disclosure requirements. Coinbin's brazen, "it's not a hack, it's maintenance" approach demonstrated that in the wild west of crypto exchanges, sometimes the most effective security measure is simply a straight face and unwavering denial. 41. The Tuesday morning calm at Liquid Global Exchange shattered in August 2021 when hackers casually siphoned $97 million from the Japanese platform's hot wallets. Within minutes, the stolen assets were flowing through mixers and cross-chain bridges in a digital shell game designed to confound investigators. CEO Mike Kayamori immediately announced the breach with unusual transparency, providing wallet addresses and transaction details while working with other exchanges to freeze funds. Unlike many hacked competitors who downplayed incidents, Liquid publicly documented its investigation and recovery efforts. The approach worked. Crypto detective firm Elliptic helped recover a substantial portion of the stolen assets, and Liquid secured a $120 million loan from FTX to maintain solvency and customer withdrawals. The relatively happy ending turned ironic when, months later, FTX itself imploded spectacularly, and Liquid found itself entangled with a far bigger disaster. The saga demonstrated crypto's peculiar ecosystem, where today's rescuer often becomes tomorrow's catastrophe, a financial version of the circle of life, just with more indictments. 42. In February 2020, DeFi protocol BZX lost approximately $1 million in two separate attacks that left developers and investors questioning whether they understood their own smart contracts. In the first incident, an attacker borrowed 10,000 ETH from DYDX, used 5,500 ETH as collateral on Compound to borrow 112 WBTC, and then used 1,300 ETH to manipulate the Kyber network price oracle. All this financial gymnastics happened in a single transaction that netted $350,000. A few days later, another attacker executed a similar exploit for $600,000. The BZX team paused the protocol, frantically patched vulnerabilities, and resumed operations, only to be hacked again months later. These attacks introduced the crypto world to flash loan attacks, a uniquely DeFi exploit where attackers borrow millions without collateral for a single transaction. The incidents forced DeFi developers to reconsider their reliance on external price oracles and highlighted how composability, DeFi's greatest strength, created intricate attack surfaces that even experienced developers struggled to secure. 43. You're trying to do honest farming, but someone keeps stealing your crops. In October 2020, Harvest Finance, a yield aggregator protocol, lost $24 million to an attacker who manipulated the prices of stablecoins in its liquidity pools through a complex arbitrage strategy. The hacker repeatedly swapped large amounts of assets between Curve and Harvest, creating artificial price imbalances they could exploit. The attack was so sophisticated that Harvest's anonymous developers initially thought it might be the work of a trading firm rather than a traditional hack. In a strange twist, the attacker voluntarily returned $2.5 million to the protocol, the digital equivalent of a bank robber tossing a few bills back while fleeing. Harvest eventually recovered, implementing protective measures against flash loan manipulation, but the incident highlighted how automated market makers remained vulnerable to price oracle attacks. The exploit demonstrated that in DeFi's wild frontier, your yields were only as secure as your price feeds, and even stablecoins could be weaponized against the protocols hosting them. 44. How many times can one DeFi protocol be hacked before users get the message, value? DeFi set out to answer this question through painful experimentation. Between November 2020 and May 2021, the protocol suffered at least 3 major exploits, totaling over $15 million in losses. First came a $6 million flash loan attack on their multi-stables vault. Just as users were recovering, attackers struck again with a $10 million governance manipulation exploit. The third hack used a DNS hijacking attack to redirect users to a fake interface that drained their wallets. After each incident, Value DeFi developers would patch vulnerabilities, compensate some users, and promise improved security, only to fall victim to new exploit vectors weeks later. The protocol's name became increasingly ironic with each breach, as value steadily evaporated from user wallets. Despite the team's technical expertise, their security blind spots proved catastrophic. Value DeFi's tragic saga demonstrated how DeFi's innovative but hastily deployed smart contracts created an endless game of security whack-a-mole, with user funds as the ultimate prize. 45. Complex integrations require complex security is a lesson Alpha Homora learned the $37.5 million way. In February 2021, the DeFi lending protocol suffered one of the largest flash loan exploits in history when an attacker manipulated its integration with Iron Bank, another lending platform. The hacker created fake tokens, deposited them into Iron Bank through Alpha Homora's smart contracts, borrowed legitimate assets against this worthless collateral, and disappeared with the loot. What made this attack particularly notable was that it targeted the connection between protocols rather than either protocol directly. Alpha Homora had been audited by 3 separate security firms, none of which caught the vulnerability in how the protocols interacted. Following the exploit, Alpha Homora's parent company, Alpha Finance Lab, negotiated with Iron Bank to cover the losses and compensate users. The incident highlighted the exponential growth in attack surface that comes with DeFi's money Legos approach, where each new connection between protocols creates potential security blind spots that even multiple audits can miss. 46. In February 2021, Yearn Finance, one of DeFi's most respected protocols, watched helplessly as an attacker drained $11 million from its DAI vault. The exploit used a flash loan to manipulate Curve's 3 pool, which Yearn's strategy interacted with. Ironically, the attack occurred while developers were in the process of migrating users to a more secure V2 vault system. In an unusual twist, the hacker actually lost money due to high gas fees and slippage, effectively paying $8 million to steal $11 million. The net loss to the protocol was ultimately reduced to $2.8 million, with the rest going to ecosystem participants and miners. Yearn founder Andre Cronje, famous for his test-in-prod philosophy, took the incident in stride, implementing additional security measures while continuing development. The Yearn exploit demonstrated DeFi's peculiar economics, where attack profitability depends not just on vulnerability exploitation, but also on network congestion, gas fees, and slippage, factors that sometimes protect protocols better than actual security measures. In DeFi's strange arithmetic, sometimes the best defense is simply making attacks too expensive. 47. In September 2021, SushiSwap's MISO platform, a launchpad for new projects, suffered a $3 million exploit through a supply chain attack. Rather than targeting smart contracts directly, the attacker replaced a legitimate JavaScript file with a malicious version that diverted user funds to their own wallet. The vulnerability was discovered by a white-hat security researcher who noticed the compromised file just hours after deployment. SushiSwap developers quickly patched the issue, but not before a single auction's proceeds, 865 ETH, worth approximately $3 million, had been redirected to the attacker. The funds were eventually returned after intensive on-chain detective work identified the hacker, who apparently preferred returning the money to. Facing legal consequences. The incident highlighted how DeFi's security challenges extended beyond smart contracts to the traditional web infrastructure connecting users to these protocols. Despite blockchain's immutability, the web interfaces serving as access points remained vulnerable to conventional attacks that could bypass even the most secure smart contract design. 48. He stepped onto his virtual bunny farm one day in May 2021 and found all his bunnies slaughtered. Pancake Bunny, a yield farming protocol on Binance Smart Chain, suffered a devastating flash loan attack that crashed its token price by 95% and resulted in $45 million in losses. The attacker borrowed a massive amount of BNB, manipulated Bunny's price through the protocol's price calculation mechanism, minted millions of Bunny tokens, and dumped them on the market. Within minutes, Bunny plummeted from 146 to less than $10. The attack's brilliant simplicity, exploiting how the protocol calculated its own token's value, left developers with no recourse other than creating a new token and compensation plan. Pancake Bunny never recovered its former prominence, though it continued operating with enhanced security measures. The exploit exemplified how yield farming protocols often prioritized complex tokenomics and attractive APYs over security fundamentals. For DeFi farmers, the lesson was clear. In the rush to maximize yields, they had unwittingly stepped into a minefield of experimental financial mechanisms with catastrophic failure modes. 49. In May 2021, DeFi lending protocol Venus faced a financial meltdown that would make traditional bankers wince. The Binance Smart Chain's largest money market suffered a series of liquidation cascades after large traders manipulated the price of its governance token, XVS, creating artificial collateral value that allowed them to borrow excessive stablecoins. When XVS inevitably crashed back to market value, the protocol was left with $200 million in bad debt and no way to recover it. The incident triggered what Venus developers euphemistically called a tokenomics adjustment, essentially printing new XVS tokens to cover losses, dramatically diluting existing holders. Auditors later determined that the protocol's Oracle system had allowed manipulated price data to influence lending parameters without adequate safeguards. Venus eventually stabilized, but never regained its former market position. The meltdown demonstrated how DeFi protocols were reinventing all the problems of traditional finance, while adding exciting new ones, creating innovative ways for sophisticated traders to extract value at the expense of regular users. In crypto's tragic comedy, even Venus couldn't escape financial gravity. 50. In April 2021, Uranium Finance, a Binance Smart Chain clone of popular DEX Uniswap, went critical and melted down in spectacular fashion. The protocol had just migrated to a new V2 contract when $50 million suddenly vanished from liquidity pools. Investigation revealed a subtle but devastating error in the migration contract's code, a misplaced decimal point that allowed attackers to withdraw 10,000x the number of tokens they should have received. The team had copied Uniswap's code, but introduced this fatal error during modifications. Blockchain sleuths tracked the stolen funds through various exchanges and mixing services, but never recovered the assets. Community members noted that Uranium's anonymous team had made minimal code changes from Uniswap's audited contracts, yet somehow managed to introduce a catastrophic vulnerability in the most critical function. The incident highlighted the dangers of DeFi's copy-paste culture, where protocols forked established projects but introduced subtle bugs during customization. In Uranium's case, all it took was a misplaced decimal point to transform a promising DeFi project into radioactive waste. 51. Relatable complaint. Your brand new streaming service stops working after one day. Now, imagine it's not just the service that's gone, but also $31 million of your money. That's what happened with Meerkat Finance, a yield farming protocol that launched on Binance Smart Chain on March 3rd, 2021, raised millions in user deposits, and vanished entirely on March 4th. The developers drained all liquidity pools through a supposed exploit, in which the project's admin keys were stolen, allowing the attacker to update smart contracts and transfer all assets to external wallets. The perfectly timed hack, just 24 hours after launch, convinced no one. Binance launched an investigation, but couldn't recover the funds. What made this rug pull particularly bold was its execution on Binance Smart Chain, theoretically under greater regulatory scrutiny than other blockchains. The incident demonstrated how even high-profile blockchain ecosystems remained vulnerable to exit scams and highlighted the futility of post-theft recovery efforts. In the DeFi menagerie, Meerkat proved that the most dangerous animals are those that disappear with your money. 52. TurtleDex crawled onto Binance Smart Chain in March 2021, promising safe and reliable yield farming. 2 days later, the slow-moving creature showed surprising speed, vanishing with $2.5 million in investor funds. The anonymous team had promoted the protocol as a rug-proof DEX with locked liquidity, even completing a pre-launch audit with TechRate. After attracting significant liquidity, developers drained all funds from the protocol's pools, converted them to Ethereum, and disappeared through Binance. The exchange attempted to freeze some of the stolen funds, but recovered only a small portion. What distinguished TurtleDex from other rug pulls was its brazen marketing around safety and security, directly targeting investors traumatized by previous exit scams. The incident illustrated how the term audit had become nearly meaningless in DeFi, with many services providing superficial code reviews rather than comprehensive security analysis. In crypto's darkly comedic ecosystem, even the slowest animals could execute surprisingly quick exit scams, leaving investors to wonder if any protocol, fast or slow, could truly be trusted. 53. In December 2021, Snowdog DAO, an Avalanche-based fork of Olympus DAO, melted faster than a snowman in July. The protocol had promised to create a decentralized reserve currency backed by a basket of assets, attracting significant investment from yield-hungry DeFi users. After 8 days of operation, the Snowdog team announced a Dutch auction buyback to reduce token supply and supposedly increase value. Instead, insiders exploited advanced knowledge of the buyback contract to extract $10 million, leaving other investors with worthless tokens that crashed 99%. The team claimed this was the intended mechanism design, not a rug pull, a distinction that meant nothing to devastated investors. The incident showcased how Olympus DAO's innovative but complex tokenomics model was being recklessly cloned across multiple blockchains without proper understanding of the economic mechanisms involved. Snowdog's rapid collapse added to the growing graveyard of failed Ohm forks and reinforced a painful lesson in DeFi. Complex tokenomics often serve primarily to obscure the inevitable exit. 54. It's not a black hole, it's a financial innovation. That could have been Stable Magnet's slogan before it sucked $27 million into oblivion in June 2021. The Binance Smart Chain project claimed to offer a new type of elastic supply stablecoin system, attracting substantial deposits from investors chasing promised returns. The anonymous team designed their smart contracts with hidden backdoors, functions that appeared benign but contained parameters allowing developers to mint unlimited tokens and drain liquidity. When these functions were activated, investors watched helplessly as their funds were siphoned away, converted to privacy coins, and disappeared forever. Security researchers later identified similar code patterns in multiple failed projects, suggesting the same team might be behind several rug pulls using different identities. The Stable Magnet collapse illustrated how DeFi's permissionless nature allowed serial scammers to repeatedly target crypto investors, with each new project hiding malicious code in increasingly sophisticated ways. Like stars being pulled into actual black holes, investor funds crossed an event horizon from which recovery was mathematically impossible. 55. JewelSwap, a decentralized exchange on Binance Smart Chain, executed one of the most brazen rug pulls of 2021. After months of legitimate operation and building user trust, the development team suddenly transferred $6 million from liquidity pools to their personal wallets in July 2021, crashed the token price, and disappeared from social media. What made this exit scam particularly notable was its execution after establishing a seemingly legitimate business. The crypto equivalent of a restaurant owner operating successfully for months before emptying the cash registers and fleeing in the night. The team had built a working product with real utility, making the betrayal all the more shocking to users. JewelSwap's collapse demonstrated how exit scams had evolved beyond simple pre-launch fundraising schemes to include established protocols with operational histories. The incident forced DeFi users to confront an uncomfortable reality. In a trustless ecosystem, even protocols with working products and active development could disappear overnight when temptation overcame ethics. 56. In April 2021, Merlin DEX materialized on Binance Smart Chain, promising magical yields through its automated market maker. 2 days later, its developers performed their greatest trick, making $680,000 in investor funds vanish into thin air. The team had launched with considerable hype, attracting liquidity providers eager to earn MERL tokens. After accumulating sufficient funds, developers emptied the liquidity pools, converted assets to BNB, and disappeared. What distinguished Merlin's rug pull was its brevity. The entire project existed for just 48 hours from launch to disappearance. The incident highlighted the minimal effort required to execute profitable crypto scams during the 2021 bull market, when investor FOMO often overwhelmed due diligence. Binance Smart Chain's low transaction costs and friction-free deployment made it particularly attractive for short-lived scam projects. Merlin DEX joined dozens of similarly named protocols in the blockchain graveyard, leaving investors with a valuable lesson about magical thinking. In crypto, promised enchantments usually ended with disappeared funds and valuable lessons about checking contract code before depositing. 57. In June 2021, Safe Dollar stablecoin protocol on Polygon blockchain experienced the greatest branding irony since the Titanic was called unsinkable. The allegedly safe stablecoin was exploited through a vulnerability that allowed attackers to mint infinite tokens, instantly devaluing the token from $1 to effectively zero. The $250,000 exploit targeted flaws in the protocol's reward distribution mechanism, which hadn't been properly audited before launch. Safe Dollar had emerged amid a wave of algorithmic stablecoin experiments following Terra Luna's initial success, each claiming innovative mechanisms for maintaining dollar pegs. After the attack, the team suspended operations but never resumed, effectively abandoning the project. The Safe Dollar collapse joined a growing list of failed stablecoin projects that demonstrated how the seemingly simple concept of maintaining a dollar peg involved complex economic mechanisms with catastrophic failure modes. In crypto's theater of the absurd, nothing crashed faster than assets with safe in their names, a naming convention that reliably predicted disaster with almost perfect accuracy. 58. In May 2022, as Terra's ecosystem was collapsing in spectacular fashion, Mirror Protocol suffered a different kind of calamity. The synthetic asset platform, which allowed users to trade tokenized versions of stocks and other real-world assets, fell victim to an Oracle attack. The price feed for Luna Classic, ELNC, used as collateral in the system, became severely outdated during Terra's meltdown. Attackers exploited this price discrepancy to borrow millions against nearly worthless collateral. By the time developers noticed, the protocol had lost approximately $115 million. What made the exploit particularly devastating was that it occurred during the broader Terra ecosystem collapse, when developers were distracted by the larger catastrophe unfolding around them. Mirror Protocol never recovered, becoming collateral damage in Terra's implosion. The incident highlighted how DeFi's interconnected nature created cascading failure modes, where problems in one protocol could directly impact supposedly unrelated systems. In crypto's version of chaos theory, a stablecoin collapse in one protocol could trigger Oracle failures and exploits across an entire ecosystem. 59. The democratic ideal of governance took a dark turn in April 2022 when Beanstalk Farms, a credit-based stablecoin protocol, lost $182 million to an attacker who momentarily became its majority shareholder. The exploit was governance-based perfection. The attacker took a flash loan of nearly $1 billion in assets, used it to buy enough governance tokens for 67% voting power, proposed a malicious transfer of treasury funds, instantly approved it, drained the protocol, and repaid the flash loan, all in a single transaction taking seconds. The governance mechanism, designed to prevent centralized control, became the very attack vector that destroyed the project. Beanstalk's founders, who had launched the protocol anonymously but revealed their identities after the attack, launched a recovery effort that included a request to the hacker to return funds as a white hat bounty. The unprecedented scale of this governance attack forced DeFi developers to reconsider fundamental assumptions about on-chain voting systems and highlighted the inherent vulnerability of protocols where control could be temporarily seized through borrowed capital. 60. In March 2022, Casio dollar stablecoin on Solana suffered the DeFi equivalent of discovering your currency printer has been hijacked. Attackers exploited a vulnerability in the protocol's collateral verification mechanism, allowing them to deposit fake collateral tokens and mint unlimited cash stablecoins. Within hours, the attacker had minted and withdrawn over $50 million, causing the stablecoin to depeg from $1 to effectively zero. Small holders, under $100,000, eventually received compensation after the hacker mysteriously returned, some funds specifically for this purpose. The exploit revealed critical flaws in how the protocol verified cross-chain assets, highlighting the security challenges of bridge infrastructure. Casio never recovered, joining the expanding graveyard of failed algorithmic stablecoins. The incident demonstrated how seemingly minor implementation details in complex financial systems could lead to catastrophic outcomes. In this case, the ability to create unlimited money from nothing, an ancient financial scam reimagined for the blockchain era. 61. Deus Finance learned the hard way that lightning does strike twice, or in their case, 4 times. Between March and April 2022, the DeFi derivatives platform suffered repeated flash loan exploits totaling over $20 million. Each attack followed a similar pattern, manipulating price oracles through flash loans to create artificial collateral value, borrowing against this inflated collateral, and disappearing with the proceeds. After each exploit, developers would patch the specific vulnerability, only to see attackers find new vectors through slightly modified approaches. What made Deus Finance's situation particularly notable was the project's resilience. Despite multiple devastating attacks, the team continued development and eventually implemented more robust Oracle systems. The protocol's ordeal illustrated both the relentless creativity of DeFi exploiters and the stubborn determination of some development teams to build amid the wreckage. In crypto's unique blend of tragedy and farce, Deus Finance became the blockchain equivalent of a horror movie character who refuses to die despite repeated attacks, earning grudging respect for sheer persistence. 62. Cross-chain protocols promised to connect blockchain islands into a unified ecosystem. Instead, they mostly connected hacker wallets with user funds. In March 2021, Elk Finance became another casualty of bridge exploitation when attackers targeted vulnerabilities in its cross-chain token transfers. The protocol had implemented its own bridging mechanism rather than using established solutions, introducing critical flaws that allowed attackers to create fraudulent proofs of deposit. By exploiting these verification weaknesses, hackers extracted approximately $11.2 million across multiple blockchains. Elk Finance's team attempted recovery through a token relaunch, but never regained user trust or liquidity. The incident joined dozens of similar bridge exploits that collectively drained billions from cross-chain infrastructure, establishing bridges as the most vulnerable component of the DeFi ecosystem. The pattern became so predictable that security researchers often identified bridge vulnerabilities before they were exploited, but protocols frequently ignored warnings in favor of rapid deployment. In blockchain's evolving security landscape, cross-chain bridges became the equivalent of hanging a "Rob Me" sign on your digital assets. 63. Rari Capital's Fuse lending protocol introduced an innovative feature in 2022, letting anyone create custom lending pools with unique parameters. Hackers found this innovation particularly exciting, especially the part where re-entrancy vulnerabilities allowed them to drain $80 million from multiple pools through repeated withdrawals of the same collateral. The exploit targeted pools integrated with the ERC-7 token standard, which permitted callback functions that could be weaponized against the protocol's accounting system. Despite security audits by multiple firms, these critical vulnerabilities remained undetected until exploitation. Fuse pools across 8 separate markets were drained in the attack, affecting hundreds of users and projects building on the platform. The incident highlighted how DeFi's permissionless composability, often cited as its greatest strength, created exponentially complex security challenges that even experienced development teams struggled to address. Rari Capital's collapse reinforced an uncomfortable reality. In pursuit of financial innovation, DeFi protocols were creating intricate systems with catastrophic failure modes that no amount of conventional auditing could fully secure. 64. Indexed Finance suffered a $16 million exploit in October 2021 that turned into one of crypto's strangest legal dramas. Unlike most anonymous attackers, 18-year-old Canadian programmer Andy Majedovich identified himself as the white hat hacker responsible, claiming he had simply discovered a mathematical arbitrage opportunity rather than an exploit. When Indexed's team tracked him down, instead of returning funds, Majedovich offered to keep $3 million as a bounty for finding the vulnerability. This audacious counteroffer led to both civil and criminal proceedings, creating unprecedented legal questions about the nature of smart contract exploits. The technical attack itself targeted how Indexed calculated token weights during rebalancing, allowing the attacker to manipulate exchange rates and extract value from the protocol's pools. The case forced courts to confront novel questions about code exploits versus legitimate arbitrage, questions that remained unresolved as legal proceedings continued across multiple jurisdictions. In DeFi's evolving intersection with traditional law, the Indexed Finance case created jurisprudence that would shape how smart contract exploits were treated by legal systems worldwide. 65. Everyone thinks they know what a rug pull looks like. Developers launch token, take money, disappear. ShadowFi elevated the art form to new heights in October 2021 with a sophisticated performance worthy of an Ocean's 11 sequel. The project launched with a complete ecosystem including NFTs, staking, and governance, operated legitimately for weeks to build trust, then suddenly drained $1.4 million through a hidden contract function. What distinguished ShadowFi was its elaborately staged hack. Developers triggered their own exit while simultaneously posting panic messages about being under attack, complete with promises to investigate and compensate users. This theater of victimhood bought valuable time for laundering funds through multiple chains and mixer services. Blockchain analysts eventually identified the supposedly separate team and hacker wallets as working in coordination, exposing the charade. ShadowFi's elaborate exit demonstrated how rug pulls were evolving from crude smash-and-grab operations into sophisticated confidence schemes with multiple acts, props, and costumed performances, raising the unsettling question of how many other hacked protocols were actually inside jobs with exceptional production values. 66. In May 2021, yield aggregator AutoShark Finance suffered a $750,000 exploit through one of DeFi's most elegant attack vectors, using the protocol's own vault strategies against it. The attacker deployed a flash loan to manipulate the price of Shark tokens, artificially inflating their value within the protocol's pools. This manufactured price discrepancy allowed them to deposit overvalued tokens as collateral, borrow against them, and disappear before the price returned to market reality. The AutoShark team quickly identified the vulnerability, but couldn't recover the funds, instead offering a compensation plan through newly minted tokens. What made this exploit particularly noteworthy was its precision. Unlike many DeFi attacks that drained protocols completely, this attacker extracted a calculated amount that maximized profits while minimizing attention. The incident highlighted how DeFi's automated strategies created predictable attack patterns that could be exploited with mathematical precision. In the evolving cat-and-mouse game between protocols and exploiters, AutoShark demonstrated how even smaller exploits could be executed with surgical efficiency when attackers understood a protocol's underlying mechanics. 67. He filed the lawsuit before breakfast. Or at least that's how quickly Polyyield Finance executed its $6 million rug pull in June 2021. The yield farming protocol on Polygon blockchain had attracted significant liquidity with promises of sustainable high APYs through a supposedly innovative tokenomics model. After weeks of legitimate operation building user trust, developers suddenly transferred funds from liquidity pools and vaults to personal wallets and disappeared from all communication channels. What distinguished Polyyield from countless similar exit scams was its targeting of the Polygon ecosystem, which had positioned itself as a more secure alternative to Binance Smart Chain's Wild West reputation. The incident demonstrated how no blockchain was immune to fraudulent projects, regardless of its technical merits or governance structure. Polyyield's collapse contributed to a broader pattern that accelerated DeFi's maturation, pushing users toward established protocols with proven track records and identifiable teams rather than anonymous projects promising unsustainable yields. In blockchain's harsh, evolutionary landscape, each rug pull culled another group of investors from the yield-chasing herd. 68. In August 2022, Nerve Finance's cross-chain bridge joined the prestigious club of exploited DeFi bridges when attackers stole $9 million through a vulnerability in its swap mechanism. The protocol, designed to facilitate transfers between Binance Smart Chain, Avalanche, and other networks, contained a critical flaw in how it verified and processed cross-chain transactions. Attackers manipulated this vulnerability to create artificial arbitrage opportunities, extracting value through price discrepancies between bridged assets. Unlike many exploited protocols that collapsed entirely, Nerve Finance's development team implemented an innovative recovery plan, issuing new tokens and redesigning the bridge architecture to prevent similar attacks. The incident added to mounting evidence that bridge infrastructure represented the most vulnerable component of the DeFi ecosystem, a critical weakness in blockchain's cross-chain ambitions. As users continued losing billions to bridge exploits across various protocols, the industry faced an uncomfortable question. Was the convenience of cross-chain operations worth the seemingly inevitable security sacrifices that came with complex bridging mechanisms? 69. You deposit money in a vault expecting interest, but instead get a black hole. In July 2022, Solana-based Nirvana Finance promised enlightened yields through an innovative stablecoin system. Instead, users achieved financial emptiness when an attacker exploited a flaw in the protocol's mint function. The exploit was mathematical poetry. The attacker deposited $10 million to artificially inflate the token price, minted $10 million of ANA tokens at the inflated rate, then withdrew their original collateral plus the newly created value. This perfectly executed arbitrage left Nirvana with a $3.5 million hole and users with worthless tokens. The team offered the attacker a $300,000 bug bounty to return funds, a proposal met with digital silence. Nirvana's name proved darkly prophetic. The protocol achieved a state of non-existence, its tokens rendered valueless. The collapse illustrated how seemingly elegant financial mechanisms could contain fatal contradictions that, once discovered, led to instant protocol death. Some mathematical paradoxes can only be resolved through total system failure. 70. In August 2022, cross-chain bridge Nomad demonstrated the wisdom of crowds by getting robbed by one. The $190 million heist began when a single attacker discovered that a smart contract upgrade had accidentally removed transaction verification, allowing anyone to simply forge withdrawal proofs. What followed was crypto's version of a bank robbery where the vault door is left open and passersby are invited to help themselves. Observers watching the initial exploit realized they could simply copy-paste the same transaction with different wallet addresses, creating a crowdsourced hack where hundreds of copycats drained the protocol. Some claim to be white hat hackers, protecting funds, though their altruism seemed suspiciously profitable. Eventually, about $36 million was returned to the protocol. The Nomad debacle demonstrated a curious truth about blockchain security. Sometimes the greatest threat isn't sophisticated hacking, but simple human error that, once exposed, invites participation from anyone with basic technical skills and flexible ethics. 71. In 2022, Harmony's Horizon Bridge learned that while crypto developers focus on obscure financial theories, hackers focus on basic security. The cross-chain bridge connecting Ethereum to Harmony's blockchain was hacked for $100 million when attackers compromised the private keys, controlling its multi-signature wallet. Harmony had implemented a 2 of 5 multi-signature scheme, requiring just 2 signatures to authorize transactions, a security choice that provided convenience at the expense of, well, security. After gaining control of 2 keys, the hackers, later identified as North Korea's Lazarus Group, systematically drained the bridge's assets. Harmony quickly offered a $1 million bounty, later increased to $10 million, for the return of funds, a proposal North Korea's weapons program apparently found uncompelling. The incident highlighted how bridge security often relied on centralized key management rather than trustless mechanisms. In pursuing the blockchain ideal of decentralization, many projects created ironically centralized points of failure that negated their technological aspirations. 72. In January 2022, Qubit Finance became another exhibit in the Crypto Bridge Security Museum after losing $80 million to an attacker who identified the financial equivalent of a typo. The cross-chain protocol contained a logical error in its deposit function that allowed hackers to deposit nothing while receiving credit for Bitcoin deposits. This something-for-nothing vulnerability was exploited repeatedly until the protocol's reserves were thoroughly depleted. Qubit Finance developers, seemingly surprised that someone would exploit free money opportunities, offered the attacker a $2 million bug bounty to return funds. When this generous 2.5% finder's fee was ignored, they resorted to pleading, suggesting the hack was affecting thousands of real people. The exploit highlighted how bridge protocols often prioritized user convenience and development speed over security fundamentals. Qubit Finance eventually developed a compensation plan for users, but never recovered its former position. The incident added to mounting evidence that cross-chain bridges represented blockchain's most vulnerable infrastructure, digital, highways where funds entered, but sometimes never reached their destination. 73. In February 2022, Meter.io's cross-chain bridge joined the graveyard of exploited protocols after losing $4.4 million to attackers who discovered they could mint unlimited fake tokens. The bridge had failed to properly validate wrapped assets between Ethereum and Binance Smart Chain, allowing attackers to deposit fake wrapped ETH that the protocol accepted as genuine. The vulnerability exposed a fundamental challenge in cross-chain bridges: the complexity of verifying assets across disparate blockchains without relying on trusted third parties. Meter's team responded by temporarily suspending bridge operations and implementing new security measures, but user confidence never fully recovered. The incident proved that in blockchain's cross-chain aspirations, the weakest link wasn't the underlying blockchains themselves, but the bridges connecting them. These essential but vulnerable connectors repeatedly demonstrated that solving blockchain's interoperability problem created more security challenges than it resolved. The dream of a seamlessly connected, multi-chain ecosystem remained elusive, as each bridge collapse further exposed the technical compromises required to bridge fundamentally different systems. 74. You expect your security guard to protect your home, not invite robbers in for tea. In February 2022, Wormhole, Solana's critical bridge to Ethereum, lost 120,000 ETH, worth $325 million, when attackers bypassed its signature verification system. The exploit targeted a function that had been removed in an update but wasn't properly patched across all environments, creating a vulnerability window. What made this hack particularly notable was the response. Jump Crypto, Wormhole's parent company, replenished the entire $325 million within hours to maintain the bridge's functionality. This extraordinary backstop, unprecedented in scale, revealed the deep pockets behind Solana's ecosystem and the systemic importance of cross-chain bridges. Without this intervention, Solana's entire DeFi ecosystem would have faced potential collapse as wrapped Ethereum on the network suddenly lost its backing. The incident illuminated the paradox of decentralized finance. While the technology promised trustless protocols, many systems ultimately relied on centralized entities with traditional corporate resources to ensure solvency when security failed. 75. IRA Financial took the crypto in cryptocurrency a bit too literally in February 2022, when the retirement account provider mysteriously lost $36 million in client funds. The company had promoted self-directed IRAs invested in digital assets as the future of retirement planning. Future shock arrived when hackers compromised their Gemini exchange account and systematically drained customer holdings. The aftermath turned bizarre when IRA Financial sued Gemini, claiming inadequate security measures, while Gemini countered that IRA Financial had disabled critical security features. Meanwhile, customers discovered their tax-advantaged retirement savings had vanished into blockchain anonymity. The incident highlighted the unique risks of combining traditional financial structures, like retirement accounts, with experimental digital assets. Regulators took notice, with the SEC accelerating enforcement actions against crypto IRA providers. For affected retirees, the hack delivered a painful lesson about innovation versus security in retirement planning, as their golden years suddenly looked considerably less golden after their nest eggs were scrambled by hackers. 76. In May 2021, Binance Smart Chain Protocol Spartan suffered a $30 million exploit through a delightfully simple yet devastating attack. The protocol's liquidity pools calculated token values using their own internal balances rather than external price oracles. Attackers manipulated this self-referential system by flash swapping assets to temporarily drain pools, then executing functions that calculated values based on these artificially depleted reserves. This brief manipulation allowed them to deposit minimal assets while receiving maximum value, blockchain's version of paying with counterfeit currency. When Spartan's developers realized what happened, they promptly implemented security upgrades that were essentially equivalent to closing the barn door after the crypto horses had bolted across the blockchain. The protocol managed to survive, but never regained its former liquidity. Spartan's downfall illustrated how DeFi's composable nature created unforeseen attack vectors when protocols relied on internal state for critical calculations, rather than considering how this state could be temporarily manipulated within a single transaction. 77. In May 2021, Belt Finance added its name to the growing list of Binance Smart Chain protocols exploited through flash loans when attackers stole $6.2 million through price manipulation. The exploit targeted the protocol's Venus strategy, using a series of carefully orchestrated swaps to manipulate the price of assets within the protocol's vaults. This manipulation created artificial arbitrage opportunities that the attackers drained before prices could normalize. Belt's team identified the vulnerability and patched it within hours, but not before significant damage was done. The protocol eventually compensated users through a combination of insurance funds and newly minted tokens. Belt Finance's exploitation demonstrated how flash loans, blockchain's innovation that allowed users to borrow millions without collateral within a single transaction, had transformed from a promising financial primitive into attackers' favorite weapon. These uncollateralized loans enabled sophisticated exploits requiring massive capital, democratizing high-stakes attacks, and creating an environment where protocols faced professional-level threats from the moment they deployed. 78. In July 2021, charting tool provider Bogged Finance discovered that sometimes the monsters you're tracking are also tracking you. The Binance Smart Chain protocol, which provided trading charts and limit orders for decentralized exchanges, suffered a $3.6 million exploit when attackers discovered a flaw in its staking system. The vulnerability allowed hackers to artificially inflate token rewards through a complex series of transactions that manipulated the protocol's distribution mechanism. In response, Bogged implemented a migration to a new token contract, essentially creating V2 with improved security. The team's transparent communication and rapid response helped retain user trust, with the protocol eventually recovering much of its market position. Bogged's experience highlighted the unique challenges of DeFi security. Even protocols designed to help traders navigate the ecosystem's risks could themselves become victims of sophisticated exploits. The incident proved that in crypto's treacherous landscape, even the cartographers needed protection from the dragons they were mapping. 79. When your token has "safe" in the name, the universe apparently views it as a challenge. Safe BTC, launched in March 2021 amidst the Binance Smart Chain token boom, promised investors safe and passive income through its tokenomics model featuring reflection rewards and automatic liquidity generation. By April, the development team had vanished, along with approximately $4 million in liquidity, leaving investors with worthless tokens and empty promises. The project had initially built credibility through exchange listings, partnerships with smaller projects, and a roadmap featuring wallet development and charitable initiatives, all apparently elaborate window dressing for the eventual exit. Safe BTC's collapse highlighted how even seemingly established BSC projects with functioning products could be elaborate setups for exit scams. The rug pull reinforced a painful truth for crypto investors. Adding "safe" to a token name was the financial equivalent of a horror movie character saying, "I'll be right back," a near certain indicator of impending doom. 80. In August 2021, RugDoc, a project dedicated to identifying scams, experienced the ultimate irony when its tokens suffered a $200,000 exploit. The protocol, created to help investors identify rug pulls and vulnerable projects, fell victim to a vulnerability in its own staking contract that allowed attackers to mint unlimited tokens. This delicious contradiction forced the project's founder to frantically tweet that while the token was compromised, the RugDoc platform itself remained secure. The team quickly deployed a new token and compensation plan, but the reputational damage was significant. After all, how could investors trust rug pull identification services from a project that couldn't secure its own smart contracts? The RugDoc incident highlighted the extraordinary technical challenges of blockchain security, where even security-focused teams with specialized expertise could miss critical vulnerabilities. The exploit served as a humbling reminder that in DeFi's complex landscape, security was a journey rather than a destination, and even the experts remained vulnerable to the very risks they helped others identify. 81. The Dodo decentralized exchange discovered that sometimes being a smart bird isn't enough in the crypto jungle. In March 2021, the protocol suffered a $3.8 million exploit through a sophisticated initialization vulnerability in its new liquidity pools. When creating a new trading pair, the first deposit was temporarily treated as the sole liquidity provider, creating a brief opportunity for price manipulation. Attackers exploited this window to execute a complex series of transactions that drained value before the pools could properly calibrate. Dodo's team responded with impressive technical agility, identifying the vulnerability and freezing affected pools within hours. Even more surprisingly, the attackers eventually returned about $1.89 million of the stolen funds, suggesting they might have been white hat hackers demonstrating the vulnerability rather than malicious actors. Dodo survived and continued development, but the incident illustrated how even seemingly minor implementation details in complex DeFi protocols could create devastating attack vectors that neither auditors nor developers anticipated until exploited in production. 82. Baron Finance learned that in DeFi, sometimes your financial strategies are more attractive to hackers than to investors. In August 2021, the Binance Smart Chain yield aggregator lost $11 million when attackers identified a critical flaw in how its strategies interacted with external protocols. The vulnerability allowed hackers to manipulate collateral valuation through flash loans, creating artificial price discrepancies they could exploit for profit. Baron's developers responded by pausing the protocol and eventually implementing a compensation plan, but the damage to user confidence proved difficult to repair. The exploit highlighted how yield aggregators, protocols designed to automate optimal investment strategies across multiple platforms, inherently increased attack surface by connecting to numerous external contracts. This composability, while powerful for generating yields, created complex dependencies that were difficult to secure comprehensively. Baron's misfortune demonstrated that in DeFi's pursuit of efficiency through automation and integration, each new connection added not just potential yield, but also potential vulnerability. 83. In August 2021, Xwin Finance on Binance Smart Chain learned that sometimes the difference between security and catastrophe is a single missing function check. The protocol lost $300,000 when attackers exploited a vulnerability in its fund management system that allowed them to withdraw the same assets multiple times. This relatively modest exploit, small by crypto heist standards, received a surprisingly specific response from the project's developers. A precise 12-point timeline of the attack, detailed technical explanation, and compensation plan announced within 24 hours. This transparent and technically competent response helped the protocol retain user trust despite the security breach. The Xwin Finance incident demonstrated that in DeFi's frequent security failures, the recovery strategy often determined a project's fate more than the exploit itself. Projects that responded with transparency, technical clarity, and fair compensation often survived and even thrived after breaches, while those that obfuscated, blamed others, or abandoned users typically collapsed regardless of the exploit's size. 84. In December 2021, blockchain gaming platform Vulcan Forged discovered that even virtual worlds need real-world security. The platform, which operated a marketplace for NFTs used across multiple play-to-earn games, suffered a $140 million hack when attackers compromised the private keys to 96 wallets containing user funds and the platform's native PYR token. Unlike many DeFi exploits targeting smart contract vulnerabilities, this attack stemmed from fundamental key management failures, essentially the blockchain equivalent of leaving your house keys under the doormat. Vulcan Forged responded by quickly reimbursing affected users from company reserves and migrating to a more secure wallet system. The incident highlighted how even as blockchain technology advanced with sophisticated financial mechanisms, many projects still struggled with basic security practices like private key management. The platform ultimately recovered, but the hack served as a reminder that in the rush to build virtual worlds and economies, developers sometimes neglected the mundane but critical security foundations protecting user assets. 85. In April 2021, DeFi lending protocol EasyFi suffered an $81 million hack through the blockchain equivalent of having your house keys stolen. Unknown attackers compromised the private key to the project founder's administrative MetaMask wallet, gaining access to the protocol's smart contracts. Rather than exploiting code vulnerabilities, the hackers simply used the stolen keys to transfer funds and mint millions of worthless Easy tokens. This old-school theft highlighted how even technically sound smart contracts remained vulnerable to the human elements securing them. EasyFi's founder later claimed the private key had been stored on a hardware-secured computer without internet access, raising disturbing questions about either sophisticated targeted attacks or potential insider involvement. The protocol survived through a compensation plan involving newly issued tokens and a recovery fund, but user trust never fully recovered. EasyFi's misfortune demonstrated that while blockchain focused on trustless automation, many projects still relied on centralized points of control that, once compromised, could undermine even the most carefully designed systems. 86. In September 2021, cross-chain bridge P-Network discovered that connecting blockchains sometimes meant connecting to catastrophe. The protocol lost 277 BTC, worth $12.7 million, when attackers exploited a vulnerability in its tokenized Bitcoin deployment on Binance Smart Chain. The hack targeted how wrapped Bitcoin was generated and validated when moving between chains, allowing attackers to create fake PBTC tokens. The P-Network team quickly isolated the vulnerability, implemented fixes, and offered the hacker a $1.5 million bounty to return funds, an offer predictably ignored. Despite the significant loss, the protocol managed to secure additional investment and continued development, eventually recovering much of its market position. The P-Network exploit reinforced the emerging pattern that cross-chain bridges represented blockchain's most vulnerable infrastructure, with security challenges fundamentally different from single-chain applications. These critical connectors repeatedly demonstrated that blockchain's interoperability aspirations often came at the expense of security guarantees, creating an uncomfortable trade-off between ecosystem growth and asset safety. 87. ChainSwap discovered that lightning does strike twice when its cross-chain bridge suffered multiple exploits within a single month. In July 2021, hackers first stole $800,000 by exploiting a validation vulnerability in the protocol's smart contracts. The team quickly patched this issue and implemented compensation plans for affected projects. Just 1 week later, a second exploit drained an additional $4 million through a different vulnerability in the same bridge infrastructure. This devastating 1-2 punch destroyed user confidence and affected dozens of projects that relied on ChainSwap for cross-chain liquidity. The repeated exploits highlighted how bridge protocols often contained multiple critical vulnerabilities, with patches for initial exploits, sometimes revealing or introducing new attack vectors. Essential infrastructure that remained stubbornly vulnerable despite increasing attention from security researchers. 88. You know your security situation is dire when getting hacked starts to feel routine. In 2021, cross-chain DEX Thorchain suffered 3 major exploits within a single month, losing over $17 million total. First came a $5 million exploit through improper verification of router contracts. The team patched this vulnerability, only to face an $8 million attack targeting its ETH router a week later. Before they could recover, a third exploit drained another $4 million through a vulnerability in the protocol's Bifrost component. Throughout this security nightmare, Thorchain's development team maintained remarkable transparency, providing detailed postmortems and compensation for affected users. More surprisingly, the protocol not only survived, but eventually thrived, with the Rune token recovering its value and network security substantially improving. Thorchain's ordeal demonstrated both the extraordinary resilience of some DeFi protocols and the brutal Darwinian selection process that eliminated projects unable to weather repeated security failures. The protocol's recovery proved that in DeFi's hostile environment, the ability to learn from catastrophic failure sometimes mattered more than avoiding it entirely. 89. In October 2021, CREAM Finance's Iron Bank lending platform suffered a $130 million exploit that read like a technical thriller. Attackers identified that the protocol's AMP token integration contained a critical reentrancy vulnerability, essentially allowing them to withdraw funds multiple times before the contract could update its state. The exploit required extraordinarily precise execution across multiple contracts and flash loans, demonstrating a level of technical sophistication beyond typical DeFi attacks. CREAM Finance had previously suffered smaller exploits, but continued operations with security patches. This final catastrophic breach, however, effectively ended the protocol as a major DeFi lender. The incident highlighted how even audited contracts could contain devastating vulnerabilities when multiple systems interacted in ways that individual audits failed to capture. CREAM's demise illustrated the challenging reality that in DeFi's composable ecosystem, security wasn't simply a property of individual contracts, but emerged from their complex interactions that often created attack surfaces invisible to conventional security approaches. 90. In 2021, leading DeFi protocol Compound Finance accidentally created crypto's most expensive typo when a single misplaced decimal point in an upgrade distributed $90 million in comp tokens to random users. The error occurred in Proposal 62, which updated token distribution parameters, but contained a critical bug in how rewards were calculated. Once implemented through Compound's governance system, the bug began hemorrhaging tokens at an alarming rate, with no way to stop it without another time-locked governance proposal. Compound's founder, Robert Leshner, initially threatened users with IRS reporting if they didn't return funds, a strategy that backfired spectacularly before softening his approach to polite requests for voluntary returns. About $38 million was eventually recovered. Unlike exploits targeting security flaws, this incident highlighted the unique risks of decentralized governance, where even simple errors could cause catastrophic fund loss with no emergency brake. The debacle forced DeFi protocols to reconsider governance mechanisms, balancing decentralization ideals with practical realities of code fallibility. 91. You expect ice cream to melt in summer, not your investment strategy. In August 2021, ice cream-themed DeFi protocol Popsicle Finance watched $25 million evaporate when attackers exploited its multi-chain yield optimization strategy. The vulnerability targeted how the protocol's sorbetto pools handled fee distribution across different liquidity positions, allowing attackers to manipulate share calculations and extract excess rewards. What made this exploit particularly notable was its technical complexity, requiring deep understanding of both Popsicle's unique mechanisms and Uniswap v3's sophisticated concentrated liquidity system. The protocol's pseudonymous founder, Daniele Sestigali, who later faced controversy with Wonderland Time, implemented a compensation plan using newly minted tokens, but the protocol never regained its former prominence. Popsicle's meltdown highlighted how DeFi's cutting-edge innovations often combined multiple complex systems, creating security challenges that even experienced developers and auditors struggled to fully comprehend. As protocols pushed boundaries with increasingly sophisticated mechanisms, they created novel attack surfaces that only became apparent when exploited in production. 92. In January 2021, fixed-rate lending protocol 88 discovered that sometimes the slow lane is safer when attackers exploited a vulnerability in its deposit mechanics to steal $100,000. The relatively modest hack targeted how the protocol calculated interest when users deposited into its fixed-term yield vaults, allowing attackers to manipulate these calculations for profit. What distinguished 88's response was its speed and transparency. The team identified the vulnerability, patched it, and compensated affected users within days. This decisive action helped the protocol maintain user trust despite the security breach. The incident highlighted how smaller DeFi protocols often faced a brutal learning curve, with production environments serving as de facto security audits where real user funds were at stake. 88 survived its baptism by fire and continued development with enhanced security measures. The exploit demonstrated that in DeFi's Darwinian landscape, protocols that responded effectively to security failures often emerged stronger, while those that fumbled their response typically collapsed regardless of the exploit's technical sophistication. 93. In December 2020, DeFi insurance protocol Cover experienced the irony of needing its own product when an infinite minting exploit sent its token to zero. The attack targeted a vulnerability in Cover's reward contract that allowed unlimited creation of new tokens. Rather than quietly exploiting this for maximum profit, the attacker dramatically minted over 40 quintillion tokens, an absurd number larger than the atoms in the observable universe, then sold a small fraction, instantly crashing the price. In a bizarre twist, the attacker then returned all stolen funds with a message: "Next time, take care of your own shit." This white hat motivation didn't save the protocol, as the dilution destroyed token holder value regardless. Cover eventually merged with Yearn Finance, but never recovered its market position. The incident highlighted the existential risks of token-based governance when minting functions could be exploited, creating a particularly cruel vulnerability where attacks could devastate protocols even when funds were ultimately returned. 94. Origin Dollar learned that naming your stablecoin after the beginning doesn't protect you from the end. In November 2020, the yield-bearing stablecoin was exploited for $7 million through a re-entrancy attack that drained its backing vault. The vulnerability allowed attackers to withdraw funds multiple times before the contract could update its state, a classic exploit pattern that has plagued Ethereum contracts since the DAO hack in 2016. Origin's team responded admirably, quickly identifying the vulnerability and implementing a compensation plan for affected users. The protocol eventually recovered, relaunching with enhanced security measures and continued development. Origin Dollar's experience highlighted how even familiar vulnerability patterns continued to plague DeFi protocols despite being well documented. The incident demonstrated that in blockchain's rapid innovation cycle, developers often repeated historical security mistakes, not for lack of examples, but because the pressure to innovate and deploy frequently outpaced the careful implementation of security best practices. Some lessons, it seemed, needed to be painfully relearned by each new protocol generation. 95. In November 2020, DeFi savings protocol Acropolis discovered that their financial fortress had a backdoor when attackers stole $2 million through a re-entrancy exploit. The vulnerability targeted how the protocol processed deposits across multiple savings pools, allowing hackers to withdraw funds multiple times using a carefully constructed attack path. Despite security audits from two separate firms, this critical vulnerability remained undetected until exploitation. Acropolis immediately paused all pools and began developing a compensation plan for affected users. The relatively modest size of the exploit allowed the protocol to survive, but it never regained significant market share in DeFi's competitive landscape. The incident highlighted how traditional security audits often failed to identify complex vulnerabilities that emerged from contract interactions rather than isolated code issues. Acropolis joined dozens of exploited DeFi protocols that discovered too late that security audits provided necessary but insufficient protection against sophisticated attackers who understood blockchain's unique attack surfaces better than many defenders. 96. In November 2020, pickle-themed yield farming protocol Pickle Finance found itself in a $20 million pickle when attackers exploited its pickle jars strategy. The extraordinarily complex attack targeted how the protocol's investment strategies interacted with external protocols, using a malicious contract that mimicked legitimate behavior while siphoning funds. What made this exploit particularly notable was its technical sophistication, bypassing multiple security checks through an elaborate series of contract deployments and interactions. Despite the substantial loss, Pickle Finance managed to survive through a merger with Yearn Finance, which absorbed the protocol into its ecosystem. The exploit highlighted how yield optimization strategies inherently increased attack surface by integrating with multiple external protocols, a fundamental security challenge with no easy solution. Pickle's ordeal demonstrated that in DeFi's pursuit of maximum yield through complex strategies, security sometimes became an intractable problem where even the most careful implementations remained vulnerable to sufficiently determined and sophisticated attackers. 97. You launch a project, someone steals $15 million, and then they return the money with a note saying, "Deploy in prod, shower wrecked." Welcome to Andre Cronje's world. In September 2020, Eminence Finance, an unreleased gaming metaverse project by Yearn Finance founder Cronje, was drained hours after he pushed early contracts to GitHub. The contracts weren't supposed to be usable, but eagle-eyed DeFi users discovered them and began depositing millions in a feeding frenzy to get early access. An attacker exploited a vulnerability in these incomplete contracts to drain all funds, then bizarrely returned $8 million to Cronje for distribution to victims. The incident sparked heated debate about developer responsibility versus user recklessness in DeFi's experimental frontier. Cronje, known for his test and prod philosophy, temporarily quit Twitter after receiving death threats. Eminence never launched, but the saga exposed the cult-like behavior around prominent DeFi developers, where users would risk millions on unaudited contracts based solely on reputation. The incident became a cautionary tale about DeFi's unhealthy hero worship and the dangers of deploying even experimental code to mainnet. 98. In September 2020, Yearn's experimental EMN token offered a painful lesson about expectation management in DeFi. The Yearn ecosystem had launched an unaudited, experimental, dystopian AI capital allocator that attracted over $15 million in deposits, despite explicit warnings about its untested nature. Attackers identified vulnerabilities in how the system calculated value when users deposited DAI, stablecoin, allowing them to manipulate these calculations for profit. The exploit drained all funds from the project in hours, effectively killing it before official launch. Yearn founder Andre Cronje faced intense community backlash despite his clear warnings about the experimental nature of the contracts. The EMN debacle highlighted the fundamental tension in DeFi between innovation and security. Developers needed production environments to test novel financial mechanisms, but these same environments involved real user funds at risk. The incident pushed the ecosystem toward greater use of testnets and isolated environments for experimentation, while establishing clear expectations around the risks of engaging with protocols labeled as experimental. 99. In June 2020, automated market maker Balancer discovered that not all tokens play by the rules when attackers drained $500,000 through a complex exploit targeting deflationary tokens. The attack manipulated how Balancer handled tokens with transfer fees, specifically STA tokens that burned 1% of each transaction amount. By executing repeated swaps between STA and other pool tokens, attackers gradually drained the pool's assets, while Balancer's internal accounting failed to properly track the diminishing STA balance. This discrepancy eventually allowed the attacker to withdraw significantly more value than deposited. The exploit highlighted how smart contract security required considering not just code correctness, but also how different token behaviors could interact with protocol mechanisms in unexpected ways. Balancer quickly patched the vulnerability and compensated affected users, allowing the protocol to recover and eventually thrive. The incident introduced an important new security consideration for DeFi. Protocols needed to explicitly account for non-standard ERC20 token behaviors, rather than assuming all tokens followed the same rules. 100. The DeForce protocol saga stands as DeFi's strangest heist-to-refund pipeline. In April 2020, lending platform DeForce lost $25 million when attackers exploited a re-entrancy vulnerability in its integration with IMBTC tokens. What followed was unprecedented. After draining the protocol's funds, the anonymous hacker began returning all stolen assets just days later. This unexpected reversal likely resulted from investigators tracking the stolen funds and identifying information that could lead to the attacker. The bizarre resolution continued when DeForce's founder apologized to users for the security lapse, while simultaneously taking credit for pressuring the hacker into returning funds. The incident demonstrated how blockchain's pseudo-anonymity sometimes provided insufficient protection for attackers, especially when handling large sums through regulated exchanges. D-Force eventually recovered and expanded operations, but the exploit remained a curious case study in how real-world legal pressures could sometimes resolve even seemingly untraceable blockchain thefts. Sometimes in crypto, the immutable ledger documenting your crime becomes the very thing that forces you to undo it. And for our final fact, 101. In April 2020, LendDF.me suffered a $25 million exploit through the blockchain equivalent of a logical paradox. The DeFi lending protocol contained a critical flaw in how it tracked user collateral when interacting with ERC-777 tokens, which allowed for callback functions during transfers. Attackers exploited this feature to create a logical race condition: depositing collateral, borrowing assets, withdrawing the original collateral through callbacks before the borrow was registered, then repeating this cycle until the protocol was drained. In a surprising twist, the attacker later returned all stolen funds after blockchain analysts began closing in on their identity. The protocol eventually recovered and implemented proper security measures. LendDF.me's vulnerability highlighted how different token standards created unexpected interactions with financial protocols, with seemingly minor implementation differences leading to catastrophic security failures. The incident pushed DeFi developers to more carefully consider the security implications of supporting tokens with behaviors that deviated from the standard ERC-20 specification. So that wraps up our journey through the crypto Hall of Shame. From the $460 million Mt. Gox disaster to the $4 billion OneCoin scam that never even existed on a blockchain. These failures prove innovation without ethics is just destruction with extra steps. But what do you think? Are these catastrophes just inevitable growing pains of a new financial system, or warnings we should have heeded before billions disappeared? Maybe Sam Bankman-Fried's 25-year prison sentence changed your perspective on move fast and break things. Did we miss any crypto calamities that were even more outrageous? Share your favorite financial disaster in the comments. The best ones get pinned. If you enjoyed this crypto autopsy, prove it. Smash that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss our next exploration of tech's biggest blunders.